This is Sports Talk with Steve Jones, a Seven Mountains Media production, your daily talk show with the voice of Penn State football and men's basketball, featuring interviews with special guests. Now here is your host, Mr. Steve Jones.
Kyle, how are you today?
I am doing well, Steve. It is a nice day out. It's toasty outside here at State College, but I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing great. So we'll start with a couple of topics, then work our way through. I want to talk about AI.
Allen Iverson, whoa.
It really... Practice? When we sit here and do the show, do we practice?
Never.
No.
We're in playoff mode all the time.
And then we're going to talk about sports washing, which we did talk about before the show. So we're going to get into that. So let's start with AI. This deals with technology used to officiate. Robo-Umps, which have been used in the minor league, started out in the Atlantic League. The Atlantic League has been an experimental league for Major League Baseball. The larger bases you see now emanated from the Atlantic League. The pitch clock emanated from the Atlantic League. That's where they experiment with rules and then say, okay, what's working, what's not working? Well, they've also used the Robo-Ump, which has actually had mixed results. But it's interesting that when you see headlines, and so you look at your phone, and some phones, for example, have headlines, and I feel like every third or fourth day I'll see on the headline, and of course they want you to click into it, which of course you know what I do. I don't.
You don't.
I could care less, right? I'll see a headline, right? Twitter reacts to awful umpire call on strike. Or last strike call has Twitter up in arms. I'm like, okay, who cares? And there's a series of them. It's almost like somebody is trying to set an agenda to see if they can get the robo-ump in there by picking on every call somewhere along the way. There has to be a line at some point. When you actually look at how sports are officiated, it is actually remarkable how good they really are. The bang-bang play at second. Wow, they got that one right. Right? We talk about in basketball. If you got them on the arm. Right? Football, you'll see stuff on the way. Baseball, we talk about the strike call, so forth. And, of course, hockey. These are all fast sports. More officials have been added. Right? I'll never forget 1982. Yes.
Dating yourself again, Steve.
Yes.
Why? I don't even need to say it.
1982. Dick Harder's the coach, and I'm doing the pregame show with him for basketball. And I said, Dick, they're adding in a third official this season. They used to have just two. He says, what do you think that can mean for the sport? And he looked at me and he says, Steve, that's one more guy than screw up. But you have three officials out there. Technology is a great aid to them and also to replay. So I'll give you an example. I think there is a perception by fans, and I've talked about this before, that, boy, they messed that up. Boy, I'll tell you, they hate Penn State. Oh, yeah. I bet the conference office is loving the fact that they did that. I've heard that so many times. It's quite the opposite. They dread going to the locker room, picking up their phone, and seeing either give me a call or check out your iPad, because they're sending them the plays that were missed during the game. You need to look at this now. How do I know that? I've talked to officials. They've told me that. They are graded on everything. And not only that, it's not waiting until the next day to get graded. They're going back in the locker room, and sometimes they're in that locker room a while because it was not a good night. Right? It's a relief for them to go in there and there's nothing. It's a difficult job. Right? How many of you have been asked over time, hey, we need you to come out and umpire tonight's Little League game? And it's just a kid pitch game, the 9-year-old, 10-year-old. Hey, could you do it? How difficult was it for you to do when it was over with? Right? Where you sit there and like you had to think a second. These people are making instantaneous decisions. Is every call perfect? No. But is every coach's decision perfect? No. Is every player's decision perfect? Nope. Do broadcasters make mistakes?
No.
Yeah, they do. Right. And umpires make mistakes. It's okay for humans to make mistakes. It's okay. And you have a backup system of instant replay for some of this. Last night in the College World Series, for example, it was a base run. It was a guy for Florida, hits it back to the pitcher. Now, the pitcher, the first baseman started to go after the ball, planted his foot, then went back to the bag, and the throw got there, and he's safe. And, to be honest with you, LSU kind of botched the play up. But he's called out for being out of the baseline. Okay. Now, this is a right-handed hitter going to first. So they go to the replay of it because Florida challenged it, and the call was confirmed because he's running on the infield grass for about 80% of the trip down and then finally get to the bag. But the bag is in fair territory. I mean, the entire bag is in fair territory. But he never got over to the dirt part of it until the very end of it. Everybody's like, can you believe this call? But that's the use of instant replay. My only complaint about replay is this: don't take too long. Don't take too long. In other words, you can't tell in 30 to 40 seconds, right? That means just keep it. Let's just go on. If you can't tell, don't look for fingernails or anything like that.
I believe there was a system discussed. I forget who it was by. It may have been Jeff Passan discussed it on, I think, Rich Eisen's show. He said that it's similar to the tennis system of like an instant replay on the screen. Everyone can see it.
Yes.
And it'll track where the ball was.
Right.
If it was even in by a little bit,
right,
strike, it counts as a strike. And it's
right.
Only the pitcher and catcher or hitter can challenge it.
Right.
Which I think is interesting. That it means the coach can't challenge it and like stop. Like, should we challenge? Should we challenge? No, it's the pitcher, the catcher, batter. Those three get to, they have within, of course, 20 seconds because that's when the next pitch happens, which I think is smart. And it takes 8 seconds to come up on screen.
I would just rather have a human being back there calling balls and strikes. It's a game that is played and coached, broadcast, and watched by humans. It's okay to have it officiated by humans. I don't want machines over there telling me yes or no. No, that's not what I want. Right? It's a game. I know it's a business, but it's a game. Right? And that's going to be my preference no matter what. And the women and men, and there are more and more women getting into it now, which is great. The women and men that are out there officiating games, umpiring, whatever. Look, are some better than others? It's like in anything. I'm the second best broadcaster on this show.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But it's like in anything. Right? There's some people that are better than others. That's fine.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And if you have to, and there are going to be times where, say, somebody wants to do this. Guess what? In the Atlantic League, it didn't work as well as people thought. It was like, oh, it's great. Actually, they went back and looked at it, and it had problems. And they had to recalibrate it, and some nights it worked really well, and some nights it didn't. Right? I'd rather just keep going with the system they have. What's wrong with it? Are there going to be missed calls? Sure. They're going to be missed calls. So what? Right? Did you watch the Mets game the other day with the Phillies?
Oh, it was a fun time.
Right? There was an error, a couple of guys hit by a pitch. Right? Guess what? The human beings wearing the Mets uniforms didn't do so well. It happens. Right? And I just feel like there is an agenda out there right now. It's an agenda that needs to stop. Technology is being used. Okay? It's used all the time. I'll pick up my iPad if I want to look at all the West Virginia offensive plays from last season. I can pick it up. I can I can get them all. I can look at it and see how they played, what their formations were, what their sub packages on defense happen to be. I can look at all that if I want. Okay? That's technology. That's just me getting ready for a game. Once the game starts, hey, play. Everybody needs to react. And that's just me. I'm just not the technology part of it. I'm fine on replays to a point. Don't just delay the game because you're looking for a fingernail. If you can't tell in 30 seconds. Time to move on.
Well, that is the issue that has been happening in soccer with VAR. They take like 7-8 minutes to figure out was there a tiny bit of his boot or his arm offsides.
Yeah,
we're talking smaller than millimeters here. We're talking tiny inches.
It doesn't matter.
And they stop the game and it takes forever.
Yep. It just, okay, that means you are not using technology properly. And that's, I'll never forget, it was the Jets were playing, I think it was the Patriots. It was a Sunday night game when ESPN had Sunday Night Football. And Al Toon for the Jets caught a 4-yard out. And they spent 7 or 8 minutes trying to figure out whether he made the catch or not. And it was the fourth quarter, and the Patriots were blowing the Jets out. Move on. Okay? Use some common sense. I'd rather have common sense used than AI as to how to go about it. That's just me.
Yeah.
Right? That's just me. And I don't need to find out whether his toe was over the line, which is a mythical line, on offsides. It is a gauge line as to whether you're offside or not. Please. Right? People are there to watch the action. They are not there to watch you officiate. Right? And I don't need to have going around and around and around. Right? And I've had more complaints about, not in basketball. Basketball's been fine. Right?
So you're not there to watch Scott Foster every night? That's what James Harden's there for.
No. But I've had more problems with the replay officials in football, where they'll make a decision and Jack and I will look at each other like, what the heck are they watching here? And I've seen it go both ways. I mean, I've always talked about an example where Nick Suke they said he intercepted a pass against Purdue. It was a big play in the game. Right? We looked at the replay. Yeah, we both strongly felt, the ball hit the ground, trapped it. And the play stands as called. We're looking at each other like, it benefited Penn State. We're looking like, what the heck are you talking about?
They always say it's either confirmed, it stands, or it's overturned, which I think is the stupidest thing. It should either be, it's okay, or it's not.
Stands is just code for they can't tell.
Yeah, they can't tell, which...
Okay. And I'm fine with that.
I still think that, if you can't tell, you either spent too much time on it looking for a minutia, or it's quite clearly not, and you're looking for a reason to overturn it for some reason, but you can't get there.
Sure.
That's what it feels like.
Sure. Now, let's get into sports washing for a moment. This is
a topic.
This is a great topic. It is not a new concept. So let's take the Olympics. It was decided a long time ago in the old Soviet Union that they would show the world how superior the society happens to be through sports. Look, we turn out the greatest gymnasts. Look, we turn out the greatest hockey team. Look, we turn out, which then East Germany, which was a communist country, same thing. There are some East German shot putters that could take a Kia and toss it over a hedge. Okay. And this went on for a long time. And everybody's like saying that, and everybody knew what was going on. China then picked that up. And you notice what China has done over and over again. Their Olympic record, especially in the summer games, has become exponentially better. Look at them now in gymnastics. become a better basketball program because they're trying to, again, show, through sports, we are superior. Okay, that's so sports watching has happened on the Olympic level for decades, where you're trying to show the world we're great through sports. Okay. And it's not like there aren't athletes from those countries that have not been admired by people in the West. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, was Yao Ming admired in the West? Absolutely he was. Olga Korbut, Lumia Terestcheva, all those great hockey players, Tretiak, Fetisov.
The crazy gymnasts that were just
over and over again. Spectacular, okay? So they've been admired and have been stars in the West. But that is the example of, on the, quote, the amateur level, I'll get back to you later on the amateur, right, of sports washing. I mean, that hockey team for the Soviet Union trained together 11 to 11 and a half months a year. Like,
yeah.
Right? That's not a life. Okay? They have great players, Karlamov, Mikhailov, Tretiak, Fetisov, Petrov, they're all great players. Yeah, and then, they were able to beat the NHL. So now let's get to what the Saudis are doing now. This really did not start with Live Golf. But if you noticed over time, before we get to soccer, because soccer is really where this emanated from. The most popular sport in the world, football. Okay. If you notice on the PGA Tour, there would always be, not playing this week. This Tiger, Rory, and the guys are playing in Dubai. Well, why are they playing in Dubai?
I wonder.
Because they enjoy the sand? Right? No, because they're getting a ton of money to go over there. Now, it was only once in a while. And then the Live Tour came on. But this really started with soccer, right? The world game. And they have poured from Saudi Arabia so much money into the sport that nobody can compete with it, where they're throwing crazy money at players, franchises, and you're sitting there saying, all right, and the fan base, well, what's going on here? Everybody complains here the Yankees have a $279 million payroll. The Pirates' payroll is $1.95. Okay? Well, that's what's going on here? Well, that's what's happening on the world stage, where maybe John Henry with Liverpool, maybe the Glazers with Man U can compete somewhat with that kind of money, but they are so awash in cash. Brandel Chambly decided to look up, and I pointed this out a couple weeks ago, but I'll just at least repeat it here. See, when I do repeat myself, it's not because I've lost my memory. It's because I'll point out that I've said it before. That he looked up how long on Google, how long will the Saudi oil reserves last? And the answer came up 221 years. They're not running out of money. Mm-hmm. At the same time, you have people really complaining about it. And the 9/11 families have justifiably made their voices heard. But it's falling on deaf ears because of the money. You deeply follow soccer.
Very much so.
What has it meant to your experience, and what's been your opinion on it?
So to get to where we are now with the money coming in from the PIF, which is the group that bought Live and PGA Tour and all of that, soccer's got a history of the ownership purchases. So, of course, the big one, which got note back a year or so ago, was Roman Abramovich, the owner of Chelsea,
yes,
who had his assets seized when there was the Russia-Ukraine conflict started.
Yes.
That was a whole deal. But he bought the ownership stake in Chelsea in 2003 and then spent money yearly that was way above everyone else.
Right.
The best teams in the world couldn't compete.
Right.
Except for Real Madrid and Barcelona, but they're different. They just have always made money because they're the biggest. So of course they're gonna. It's like the Lakers. Lakers always have money.
What about like Bayern Munich?
Bayern Munich, same thing. They just
Right.
they've built themselves up over years to always have money. So it's slightly differently how it operates.
You're shocked I even mentioned that. Go ahead.
I am. It's great. It's awesome. But then you go to 2008, and this is where a lot of the money things start popping up in soccer, which is Manchester City.
Yeah.
They were bought by a group controlled by Sheikh Mansour, who's one of like the 10 richest people in the world from United Arab Emirates. And then all of a sudden, Man City win everything. They're winning it yearly now at this point.
He doesn't own Seven Mountains Media, right?
Does not own Seven Mountains Media. No.
Thought I'd mention that.
Does not. And then I believe it was 2021 is when the PIF, the Saudi Arabian group, bought the controlling stake or the ownership stake of Newcastle United.
Yes.
They are a team in the Premier League. They're a very historical team, have been okay for years, but
they've been a middle of the pack, but never close to relegation, but never, I mean, sort of contends, but like they're not a top 4 team, but they're always in that 5 to 12 area.
They're the Atlanta Hawks, kind of. So they get bought by the PIF, and then there's talk
You're
of
shocked
oh my gosh,
I knew that.
No, you're a smart man, Steve, and so PIF buys Newcastle, and there is this discussion of, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to the Premier League? Because Manchester City, the team that has had the most money for years to spend, has been spending like crazy and like wildfire.
That's right.
And they keep winning. Right. Now, all of a sudden, is it going to become a 2-horse race and no one else is going to get close anymore? Because now Newcastle can do the same thing, but at a bigger scale.
Right.
And it's just this back and forth. And then this past year, the big one was Cristiano Ronaldo is out of contract. He leaves Manchester United. And the Saudi Arabian Pro League, Al Nasser, comes and signs him to a contract.
Right.
Ronaldo being the most followed man on Instagram, the most followed person, I believe, on Instagram in general. Right. And, of course, being one of the greatest players to ever live, joins the Saudi Arabian League. Like, what's happening here? Right. That makes no sense. Like, I know Pele joined the New York Cosmos back in the day. It's like that happening, but on a bigger scale because of social media.
Yes.
And now this summer, out of nowhere, just players linked left, right, and center with joining the Saudi Arabian Pro League. And this isn't just guys that are like 35, 36, like Ronaldo.
No, these are prime players.
In their prime players. So you've got the big one that has not gotten as much attention has been a player called Ruben Neves.
Yes.
Portuguese midfielder, 26, had offers from Barcelona, one of the biggest clubs in the world, to join them. 26 years old, should be one of the best midfielders in the world. He's going to Saudi Arabia. Some of the best players from Chelsea, their center back Koulibaly, they just spent like 60 million on him. He's going to Saudi Arabia. N'Golo Kante, France's midfielder, their starting midfielder, he's going. Like all of these players, they're at the top of their game, or 28, 30. These guys that are some of the best are leaving all of a sudden. And they're signing these crazy contracts. And it's not just that they're signing 1 or 2 guys per team. They're each signing like 6 or 7. There is a laundry list of like 15 players. They've got Neymar. You've got Wilfred Zaha. Some of these guys that are staples in these leagues are being offered contracts to join the Pro League for big money deals. But there would be an exodus of 30 players.
They're going to get the money.
They're going to get the money.
Right? So there's no question about that. But will they get the exposure?
That is the question everyone has.
And I don't think they're going to get the exposure. I think playing, believe it or not, actually playing in MLS, the money's not there unless you're Messi.
Even for Messi, it's nowhere near what he got offered in Saudi Arabia.
Nowhere near what he got offered. But they'll, through Apple TV and a 10-year contract, they will get the exposure. Playing in the Premier League or playing in the European leagues, they will get great exposure. I never hear anything about soccer in Saudi Arabia except when it comes time to pay somebody. Now, they're going and they're going to get the money. But they're not going to get the exposure.
And that's the thing.
And that's when you look at Live Golf. I mean, does anybody have any idea who's won any of the tournaments on Live Golf? Nobody does. The only time anybody sees anybody from Live Golf is when they play in the Masters the PGA, the U.S. Open, and the Open Championship. And they're like, oh, yeah, hey, Koepka's still pretty good. Hey, that's great. You know, hey, oh, look, Phil. Yeah. Right? They're all wearing their team jerseys. How adorable. You know, Dustin Johnson. Oh, yeah, well, it's great. Because, you know, guess what? Okay. And those are the tournaments that matter anyway. Just like nobody can tell you that Keegan Bradley won the Travelers this week. Right? But they're going to go there. They will get the money. Their bank accounts will be, right, bigger than ever. And the only time you're going to see them is in the World Cup.
That is the biggest point of discussion, because there are so many players that have come to the MLS and tried to still. There was this view for years in the MLS that if you come here as a promising European, you're not going to play on your country's national team because they view the league as lower. That there's a tiering system of the best leagues in the world. The MLS
is not
top 20.
I was on a flight, and you know, they have one of the airline magazines there. There was a story about how popular MLS is in England. Why? Because older players that British fans have been fond of were now playing in MLS. I think the thought process is that Messi can be to MLS what Pele was to the North American Soccer League in the 70s when he went to the Cosmos, and the Cosmos then signed Giorgio Canaglia, then signed Franz Beckenbauer,
and then
had an American in goal named Shep Messing.
And then be the same that Beckham was in 07 when he signed for the Galaxy. Be that level of star.
Beckham did, I mean, in terms of like helping out MLS, he did, but only to a point.
He put the league at least back on the national scale because not only was he a great soccer player, but he also
he's a personality.
He's the biggest personality.
He's a personality.
In the world.
No, it's when the Red Bulls are going to host Miami FC at some point, and instead of playing there in Harrison, they should move it over to MetLife Stadium. He'll sell it out.
Yep,
it would be so great for the sport if that were to happen in this country, that he would sell out, because the World Cup will help the sport in this country tremendously, but there's a ceiling to it in this country. When it's over, it's like, hey, great. Hey, when do the Jets play?
Yeah. And I am intrigued to see what happens with the Saudi Pro League if they keep on buying players. That is the question on people's mind, because this has happened before, where the Chinese Super League bought a lot of players in the span of a few months. And they disappeared, and the league basically doesn't exist, but they're not talked about. They're not doing anything of note, and they had the idea
that's what's going to happen with this.
Because these leagues, the Premier League, even the MLS to an extent, has built up enough of a reputation on the national scale where they can do it. The problem with the MLS that they face, and the problem with the Argentinian League, where the biggest rivalry game ever with Boca Juniors exists, is that they're not Europe. Europe has the UEFA Champions League, has the biggest exposure in the world. They broadcast hundreds of millions for their finals. It is crazy what numbers they pull in.
Yes.
And if you are not playing in England, France, Germany, Spain, Italy, the top 5 leagues, it is tough to get anything.
Right.
To get any broadcasting rights. I bet you more people watch the second division in England than they do the Saudi League, and it's not close.
And there's going to be people that are not going to want to broadcast the Saudi League. They're going to sit there and go, I don't think so. Right? Because I'm not, while having some star power in it, I think there's a lot of people like look at it and go, okay, it's like with Live Golf. I mean, they have star power. I mean, they have Dustin Johnson, Brooks Koepka, Patrick Reed, Phil Mickelson. I mean, they've got players left and right on there. But they have a contract with the CW. Okay, that's nice. Now let's flip it to the other side. All right. So let's talk about like Premier League and so forth. They still have a lot of star power.
Oh yeah,
but look at the PGA Tour. All right. Ches Rivy is a really good player. I think he finished in the top 5 at Hartford, at Cromwell. But you can't pass him off as a star. And as much as you try to pass off guys as he's a star, and the fans are like, they determine who the stars are. Like, Ricky Fowler hasn't won in a long time. Guess what? Ricky Fowler to the fans is a star.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You can't pass off players that are not perceived as stars when they aren't. And that's the area in the Premier League that's going to be very important. You can't pass off the guy that stayed with Arsenal, right? Was not the top player. Now is the leading goal scorer, but he's still the same guy he was before. And the fans are like, hey, great. But he's not a star.
Yeah. And that's the weird area that China got in. They didn't buy the stars. They bought players like Hulk, who was a great name. They were able to bring in the top second and third tier players.
Mm-hmm. Fine, not the stars. Now the Saudis are doing the opposite. They're bringing in the stars, right? So there will be fans that they'll miss Ronaldo. Like, okay, but look, he's doing it for the money.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to think if we do that.
There is just a very big question looming over soccer right now because of this, because of the impact that Newcastle has had, where all of a sudden there's these links of them possibly signing big names. They're possibly signing one of the best players from Italy who doesn't want to leave, but the amount of money they're throwing at it is a lot. And it's bringing up questions of what is going to happen to this sport over the next few years.
So now let's take the Wizards, Capitals, Mystics, and cable network.
Monumental sports.
All right. And there was a story last week about a group from Qatar that bought a 5% interest from Ted Leonis. And we're like, oh, my goodness, here comes the foreign money. I do not know what the rules are in the NFL, Major League Baseball, or the NHL, but I do know what the rule is in the NBA. The NBA foresaw this. Foreign interests can own up to no more than 20% of the team, right? And the group from Qatar bought 5%. So there is that area in there that they at least foresaw this as a possibility of entities such as that saying, hey, we want to buy a team. It's like, well, you're only allowed to do in the NBA up to 20%. They bought 5%. Why, you ask yourself, why is it that Stan Kroenke and Ann Walton, where it's a competition between Kroenke Real Estate and Walmart as to who has more money in the house? But he owns the Rams. He owns the Nuggets. He owns the Avalanche. He owns the Colorado Rapids of MLS. I think he's one other entity.
He owns Arsenal FC, my team.
Arsenal FC. All right. John Henry and the Fenway Sports Group owns Liverpool, the Red Sox, the Penguins, and they've invested in racing. All right. Josh Harris owns the Philadelphia 76ers, the New Jersey Devils, and now is on the doorstep of getting the Washington Commanders. Now, he's got some partners that go with him, obviously. But ask yourself, why is it there's only a core group that are owning that many franchises? Because they're the only ones that have the money to do it. That's why I've always found it interesting that Bezos hasn't bought a team.
Apparently he's tried.
Right? That he hasn't bought a team. I mean, this will drive Pirate fans nuts. Mark Cuban forever has wanted to buy the Pirates. And Major League Baseball won't let him. They don't want him in the club. You don't want him in the club? Well, okay. Whatever you think of Mark Cuban, so people are going to have different opinions about Mark Cuban because he's so out there all the time. He's always out there, whether it's on a TV show or a press conference or whatever. He has a lot of opinions. Okay, but he's got money. And guess what? He's got ideas. right? This is somebody who got where he was able to get in life because he was a forward thinker. And it's almost like they don't want forward thinkers involved. The Pirates would not be in the spot they're in now if he's owning them. It doesn't mean they're going to be winning all the time, but they'd be competitive if that guy were owning them. And they don't want him. They wouldn't let him get the team. I'm all for forward thinkers being involved in the sport. It doesn't mean they're right about everything. They're not. But they're at least looking, what's the big picture? What could the future look like? That's why I always have told people, two of the college sports were so fortunate. They had two of the great forward thinkers at a critical time, Dave Gavitt and Joe Paterno. Each great forward thinkers. Joe was always looking at the big picture. What's going on with the big picture? Where do we need to take it? Kept pushing for a playoff. Oh, okay. And what do they have?
Playoff.
TV. TV is going to be the big thing going. Need a TV contract. He and Chuck Ninus worked so hard with the College Football Association. Chuck was the leader. Joe was the number 2. Okay? And they worked, and they worked out a deal originally with NBC, then finally, then CBS. Right? And it changed the landscape of college football. All right? We need instant replay in football. Gee, who's the one that kept saying that over and over again? Right? Joe did. All right? And forward thinking like that. Dave Gavitt formed the Big East. Joe tried to form an Eastern All Sports Conference. I was there when he was, I interviewed him when he tried to do it. I interviewed as the process went through. I interviewed him when it fell apart, when Pitt went to the Big East. But he tried to get Boston College, Syracuse, Rutgers, Temple, Penn State, Pitt, West Virginia, and Maryland to form an Eastern All Sports Conference. In football, they would have had an agreement with the Fiesta Bowl. This kind of forward thinking, right? When everything fell apart, right? Well, Penn State's on its own. Then Penn State eventually went to the Big Ten. And the East right now is, thank goodness Penn State's there. It's the only kind of high-level football being played. Pitt's played well, but they're in the ACC, and they're buried in terms of where they are right now.
Yeah.
It's just the way it is, just on national perception, visibility, so forth. All right. Dave Gavitt forms the Big East because it was all the ECAC this, North, South, Midwest, whatever. Right? He says, we need to have a Big East. So he gets Providence, St. John's, Seton Hall, Syracuse, right? Georgetown, Villanova, UConn, right? Seton Hall. That's how they started out. And TV is going to be big for basketball. And they're starting this network in Bristol, Connecticut called ESPN.
The worldwide leaders in sports.
Right?
Whoa.
He said, we need to be on that. We need to be on that. And it takes off because Dave Gavitt was a great forward thinker. And Dave Gavitt could go into a room of egos. John Thompson had an ego, right? Jim Boeheim, an ego. Rolly Massimino, and I say this as complimentary. Okay?
Oh yeah.
Okay, these people earn their egos.
Well, you need to have an ego if you're going to be there,
right? But they earn their egos to get there. Success, understanding how to do what they're doing, being forward thinkers themselves. Okay, and he could get consensus all the time, right? I don't know what the Saudis are doing as forward thinking. I think what they're doing, forward thinking, is for the betterment of the whole. Right? For the betterment of the whole. An Eastern All Sports Conference would have been for the better. Hey, look, there's the Big Ten, the SEC, the Southwest Conference, the Pac-8, so forth. We need to be organized. We're the only part of the country that's not organized. Right? If we organize, we can then as one get something.
Yeah.
Big E, okay? The Big East. We're just all entities all over the place. There's the Big Ten, the SEC, the ACC, the Big 8, the Pac-8, right? And we're just a mishmash of schools, Dave Gavitt. We need it as one, and then as the power of one, negotiate and keep our guys here. Let's keep the guys in Philly. Let's keep the guys in New York. Let's keep the guys in Boston. Let's keep the guys in D.C. and the Delmarva Peninsula. All right, and that's what they did. That's forward thinking. I don't think what the Saudis are doing is forward thinking. I think they're just buying people.
I think they're just buying people, but I think the one that bought part of Monumental Sports was the Qatari Sports Investment, or Qatari Investment Authority.
Yes.
But they have a subsidiary that is the Qatar Sports Investment.
Yes.
And that's where a lot of this is interesting in terms of what's going on there, because for those who don't know, Qatar Sports Investment owns majority control of Paris Saint-Germain, the French team where Neymar, Messi, and Mbappe played.
Yeah.
Like Zlatan, some of the best players in the world have played there. PSG is now on par with Barcelona, Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, Manchester United, the biggest clubs in the world. They're there now because in 2011 they were bought, with part looking forward to getting a World Cup in Qatar. And they did that successfully, in part because they had investments and they had players coming down to Qatar for things you were there.
Qatar only got the World Cup because they just literally paid for it.
Yeah. And they paid for it, and it helped them in terms of okay, we can build a brand here in Qatar via other world powers of PSG. And you always see Qatar Airways on Barcelona kits, and you saw you see Emirates everywhere. I mean, Arsenal Stadium is named the Emirates Stadium because the UAE spent a lot of money in terms of sponsorships.
I mean, why do you think there's been a Summer Olympics in Beijing and a Winter Olympics in Beijing in 8 and 22 respectively?
Yeah.
Trying to showcase the country. Right? Olympics in Moscow, Sochi. Why? Trying to showcase the country. Right? That's what they tried to do, is they tried to showcase the countries. And there's also fewer bids these days.
There are also these gigantic joint bids. That's what you see. The Olympics, both summer and winter, and the World Cup, the three biggest events globally in terms of every 4 years, those three top of the top. You can't get bigger than them. So when you get them, it does a lot for your country. It does a lot for
it does
bringing people in.
It does, but there's limited bidding now. I mean, who continues to be the bridesmaid? Kazakhstan, oil money. They're the bridesmaid all the time. When Beijing got the Winter Olympics in 22, Kazakhstan, and the vote was 44 Beijing, 40 Kazakhstan. It was that close. When the Women's World Cup went to Canada in 2015, the last one to drop out was Kazakhstan. Right? Now, when Beijing beat out Kazakhstan in 22, everybody thought Oslo was going to get it. Winter Olympics, Norway, winter, Norway. They dropped out. They can't compete financially, even though it makes the most sense to go there. And this is where we are with this. Just outbidding everybody is not forward thinking. Is it best for the overall big picture? Short term, it's really, it's great for them, short term. But what is it 5-10 years from now? And I have my doubts that they are even looking. I mean, is it their goal to shut down the Premier League? They're not going to shut down the Premier League or the Champions League or anything like that. They're not going to do that. They're not going to shut down UEFA. They're not going to do that. Now, could they shut down MLS? Yeah, but they're not a big competitor on the world scene. Right? Are they going to shut down the NFL?
Yeah.
No. Right? So what is their goal, their end game here with this? And I don't know if there is a goal or an end game, and that's where I've got, you can throw money at anything. But it doesn't mean that you have a goal, an end game, and it doesn't mean that you have a big picture view of what is best for the sport. And I don't think they have a big picture view of what is best for the sport. I think you have a lot of people right now looking at them with skepticism. Okay? The people that you need to be interested in, the fans, look at them with skepticism.
Yeah.
They get disgusted when Ronaldo signs it. Well, I'm not going to watch now.
It feels like the end game is something similar to, funnily enough, what Ted Lasso had involved in it. Was there was a bid by someone in season 1, it's not a spoiler now, where someone is buying, Edward Nkufu is buying one of the teams in, I think, either Nigeria or Algeria, an African nation, and he's buying a team because he wants to make a super league. And they want to make this super league basically what was discussed in Europe, getting this 12-team super league, but make it a global one of the best teams in the world every year playing in this big league for all this money. So it feels like the Saudi Arabian end goal is to be able to get the league to a high enough point quick where you can make a super league and then you have money coming in. Because as soon as that starts, it's not going to stop. The faucet's not going to stop on something like that because it's going to be too lucrative to stop. And they're trying to bid right now for the 2030 World Cup, or they at least were.
Oh, they'll get it.
They had a joint bid, Saudi Arabia, Greece, and Egypt. I don't know if it's abandoned or not, but it's crazy to see how much is being thrown at this so quickly that Qatar, the investment in soccer, all happened at once.
Yes.
And then they've sustained it. Can Saudi Arabia do the same thing with Newcastle?
Right. And keep in mind, the World Cup bid for the United States was Canada and Mexico as well. It was a joint bid.
It was Canada and Mexico, and the upcoming one in 26 is Canada, Mexico, U.S. There's bids in 2030 for Uruguay, Argentina, Paraguay, and Chile to host a combined one.
Well, Uruguay, of course, is there's a sentimental part of that. That's where the first World Cup was 100 years ago, 1930. So it's that 100 year, that century of that's what they're fighting against. There's going to be emotion on the 100th year, okay, on the 100th anniversary of the first World Cup to play in Uruguay to celebrate. That's what they're going to be up against, the emotion of it. The question is whether they can come up with enough money to do it. But the Super League, it's amazing when it was put out there, it got rejected roundly and the fans are the ones rejecting it.
I made I had a podcast at the time. We made an emergency episode, discussed it. I don't think I've ever seen every single fan basically globally say no to something faster than everyone did the Super League. It came out, I believe it was like 2 a.m. in the U.S. when it dropped, 2 a.m. Eastern time. Right. It came out all of a sudden because something had leaked from the Real Madrid president, Florentino Perez, and then just the floodgates opened. And then for 2 full days, there were the 12 clubs that were named. There were fan protests. There was everything. And like, as an Arsenal fan, we don't like Tottenham. It's the Yankees, Red Sox. Arsenal fans were going with Tottenham fans to Tottenham Stadium to help protest with them because everyone was like, we don't care about rivalries. We just don't want this to happen. Every single fan. There was no one saying yes to this. Not a single person. Because it blows up the entire model of the sports soccer world, which, as we said earlier, is the biggest sport in the world. It would blow up the entire system.
Your goal should not be to outlast fan sentiment. That should never be your goal. Your job is to go out there and entice people to love your product. I want to buy a kit. I want to go to a match. I want to be able to get somebody's autograph. I want to buy the concessions. I mean, that is your goal. Your goal is not to, we're going to crush all the competition and, oh, by the way, the fans aren't happy about it. And, excuse me, the only reason you're doing this is for your consumer. Okay? It goes back to the triangle I talk about. Every time there is a labor dispute, the players always say, or the head of the Players Association, hey, no players, no game. Well, guess what? No owners with money, no game. Guess what?
No fans, no game.
No fans, no game. Right? You want to sit there and play a studio game? Go ahead, knock yourself out. No fans, no game. And we found out during the pandemic how the ratings dropped when there were no fans at the games. And I think that shocked everybody. Well, everybody's just sitting at home. Why aren't they watching? Because there's not anything exciting coming through the TV set.
Mm-hmm.
They're just making plays. And then they start pumping noise in. Why are you pumping in noise?
Teams that pump in noise, I hate that.
Well, no, I do too.
That's a discussion for another day as well.
I do too, but you can't come up with a plan and force it on people, shove it down their throats. It's what we're doing. Get on board. No, I don't think so. I think I'm going to go to the park. No, I don't think so. I think I'm going to go skiing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There are options all over for people to do. It is a privilege when they select you to go. It's a privilege that 110,000 people choose on 7 Saturdays in the fall to be in Beaver Stadium. Wow. They convinced 110,000 people 7 times a year to come here, to pay for the gas, to fight the traffic, and everything. Okay, you got to make it the best experience possible. And you can't just go out there and say, hey, look what we did. We bought all the best players. Okay, great. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Guess what? USC football, quote, bought a lot of players.
Yeah.
Right? To turn themselves around. They didn't sell out every game. Right? And, this is going to be a topic we're going to talk a lot more about. Money, let's face it. Look at the New York Yankees. Payroll's $279 million this year. This is with everything combined, the current group, okay. $279 million. The New York Yankees have spent approximately $2.5 billion over the last 12 years. Between $2.5 and $3 billion on salary, and have not been to the World Series once. Starting in 2010, who's been there? San Francisco Giants have been there 3 times. St. Louis Cardinals have been there twice. The Kansas City Royals have been there twice. The Red Sox have been there twice. The Texas Rangers have been there twice.
Atlanta Braves.
Okay, the Atlanta Braves have been there. The Houston Astros have been there repeatedly. The Washington Nationals. You start going through the New York Mets. You start saying like the Detroit Tigers.
Ouch.
Right?
That one hurts.
Right, but I'm saying they spent $2.5 to $3 billion in salary over the last 12 years. And they haven't got to the World Series one time. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? You can spend money. If you're not smart about it, spending money doesn't equate to automatic success.
Success relates to success.
Okay. Look, the 7 figures we're paying you, it's worth it.
Is this what, Monopoly money?
No, I included the cents column.
Of course.
Here comes the big close.
Oh, yeah. And of course, thanks for tuning in to Sports Talk with Steve Jones, the Seven Mountains Media production. Check back daily for all the latest sports news.